Печь работает как обращенка, то есть нагрев происходит сверху. Уже другая комбинированная печь. Здесь масса закладки 450 килограммов. За 2,5 часа она также прогрелась на всю свою глубину.
Hey everybody, it's Stove Talk with Matt. This is the second video I've done in about 2 months on sauna stoves, but this video is about gigantic brick stoves where the flame laps up into the stones itself. The first video, maybe 5 or 6 weeks ago, was on the iron sauna stoves you can buy where it has a loading chamber for the stones. The flame does not directly touch the stones. Now, the truists, if that's a word, in Russia and Finland and Scandinavia, they have a snob factor. I've watched enough of these sauna stove videos over months and months. There's a snob factor where the flames really have to be touching. This is what they would say: have to be touching the stones themselves, or it's not a real sauna. You know, there's electric saunas you can buy in the Finland and Denmark box stores where you just put the stones in a little electric thing, and people pile the stones up with a cage on top of a wood stove. That's a real sauna. I mean, what more? But I'm just saying, these purists, they probably could make an argument why one's more healthy than the other. But the purists, you need to build a 4,000 or 5,000 pound gigantic Russian stove with the stones in the stove. And I'm going to show you this guy's design. I'm going to show you to me is absolutely the best. There are a lot of problems with these gigantic, massive Russian stoves where the stones or the flame laps up into the stones. They break down after a few years. They clog. This guy seems to have a lot of the problems solved, and I'll show you his design. For anybody that doesn't know what's going on here, these bathhouses are really popular in Scandinavia and Russia, and this is an electric sauna that, again, they turn their nose up at this, but just to give you an idea, they would pour the rocks right into the gigantic 7,000 pound Russian stove, and, you'd have the whole bathhouse treatment. This is very popular, and they do communal. Usually sometimes there's 20 people in a room. So this is, the stoves are for these commercial bathhouses, but many people are starting to build them even in Canada and the United States. Most sauna stoves are very similar to the ones we looked at 6 weeks to 8 weeks ago, where it's literally just rocks piled around a wood stove in some sort of a cage. Some of the ones from Russia we looked at 6 or 8 weeks ago, there's a loading chamber in the stove, but the flames in these sorts of stoves, the flames do not touch these stones themselves. In a moment, we'll be looking at the really old, traditional, truest, old, massive Russian stoves where the flames do lap up through these stones. But this is what most people have. And this is, anybody could, not anybody, but you really, it's not much more than a wood stove with a cage just with rocks on top. And as the rocks heat up, you throw water, you build yourself a little bathhouse, you pour the water all over the rocks. But in this situation, the rocks, I don't know exactly what they would get to, 300-400 degrees, maybe. The ones at the top wouldn't even be at 200 or 300 degrees at the most. The ones that I showed you a few minutes ago glowing, 1,200 up to 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit when they glow red. Okay, we're going to bounce around and look at this video. It's all in Russian. I will leave a link if you want to go back to this video and watch the whole thing, put on the closed caption. This guy has the best design. He knows he has the best design. From everything that I know, he absolutely does. I'm not going to tell him he has nonsense on his shirt. It's just, they don't even use our alphabet, so we're going to give him a break. So let's go and bounce around here. For a sauna stove where the flames lap directly into the stones, it is the entire gigantic fire brick core and bricks surrounding the fire brick core. So let me pause this. His design has a secondary air coming up usually, I mean, a lot of the, not a lot of the Russians, but some Russians do secondary air in channels between two bricks. It doesn't, secondary air needs to be preheated. It's not going to do much, in my opinion, but whatever. That's not the point of this video. The stones will be piled up here. And at first, we're going to look at a more traditional sauna stove that has a lot of problems. The flames will funnel through the stones, lap over, go down a descending channel, up an ascending channel, and out the chimney. And he's basically saying there's a lot of problems with this design, which I'll tell you about, and then how he has tried to fix it. So let me go to this is the existing design, which he's saying kind of stinks. It's just it's really it's a standard, Russian stove with a grate. The air comes under the grate. Wood is loaded in here through the door, but then by laying fire bricks across, you just create a shelf or a double shelf here where you pile up your stones, and the gases and the flame and the hot gases and smoke have to find their way through the stones and then out. Usually they are pulled down a descending channel, then up a lifting channel, which would be over here, and then out. Big problem with this, you can see metal here. It's just a kind of a cutaway. The Russians over the last 50 years that have made this design, they do have a metal grate, kind of like a metal pen or a metal fence holding the rocks, because the rocks will expand, push out the fire brick will push out the red brick, and everything will crack. Needs something very strong to push back the tension on the rocks when the rocks expand. At the end, we'll talk about what rocks they recommend, etc. But this will clog. I mean, obviously you need big stones. Small stones, nothing gets through it. It's just a waste. It has to be very big stones, round, with a lot of air spaces. But think about it. If you're not burning clean, and this guy has a solution to this. If you're not burning clean, and you have soot, smoke, ash, you have cold temperatures. It takes a long time for the stones to heat up. I mean, they're basically saying these stoves are kind of like, they almost have to be broken down after 3 years and rebuilt, which I guess if you're running a gigantic commercial bathhouse, that's part of the expense of doing business. But this just isn't workable for the long term, because these stones are going to get clogged with ash. One of the theories, though, of the Russians, they get so hot that they could almost clog initially, I think a couple people were saying, and then once you get like over 1,000-degree temperatures prolonged, everything will burn up and it'll stay a little bit cleaner. But these stoves, especially, you open a door on the side here, you pour your water over the rocks. The fire is long since gone. We'll talk about that. They just don't last. So let me jump, in case nobody wants to stick with me for as long as this is going to take. This is his solution here. Let me jump forward to, it's 7 minutes or so. Okay. He puts, here's the grate, air comes underneath, goes through the grate. Most Russian stoves are grate stoves. They're not hearth stoves. Air comes up from under a grate. Here the wood comes up, but they've put a major refractory slab, 18 inches or 20 inches up in the firebox. And then another refractory slab up, which could go all the way to the top. The slit, he kind of says, is not that necessary. So the hot gases and flames hit the refractory slab, go along a back channel, and then they funnel down through the rocks. And then this is another, whether it use metal bars or whatever they use to have all the rocks sitting on, and they funnels through these stones, heats the stones on a downdraft, and then out the side here. And I don't know if he just allows it to go directly out the chimney from here or down a descending channel, up and ascending, probably down and ascending, and up and ascending before it goes out. And what he's saying is a lot of the soot and ash and smoke, this is a sound principle, is burned up by the time the gases get to the very top. A masonry stove with a high firebox that's thin and all the heat is contained in a relatively small space. The higher you can make your firebox, the less smoke you will have. Now, there's other ways to go no smoke, but in a huge masonry stove like this, you need a high firebox. The lapping up of flames, 2-3 feet, burns up the smoke, burns up the gases. No smoke out the chimney means no soot collection, very little ash, etc. And you see from the glowing of those rocks, I mean, when you reaches 1,200 degrees on the rocks, whatever soot gets in here on the downdraft, and again, you have to use, they use big round rocks. There's a lot of room, but it's not just a big square of piled rocks. They'll usually kind of slope the rocks. So there's usually, so you, even if you have soot accumulation over years and years, there's usually a way for the flames to kind of find their way out. You know, people have done different things, create little channels, or somebody talked about putting a small pipe or two through, but you would have to be, copper wouldn't hold up. Small pipe or two through the rocks. So you'll see when I show you when he opens the door. So the difference is the old tradition of going back, whatever, I don't know, 100 years in Russia, is with these stoves, it just comes right up into the rocks. And this guy, you put a big refractory across, drive your channel up high. It's not going to act like a rocket stove riser, but these temperatures in here are going to be extremely high. It is going to burn up a lot of soot, smoke, whatever. And you have a high efficiency combustion, hot gases coming down through the rocks, then underneath the rocks are being held on a really thick grate of, very, cast iron, I'm not sure, down a descending channel, up an ascending channel. So let me bounce around. Here he's saying, I remember what he said here. Where is it? He's saying, like in the old-fashioned stoves, I mean, there's water poured, and but you have to heat these things for 3, 4, 5 hours. They have to heat before the people are supposed to come into the bathhouse, which means the fire is long since out. You pour your water over the rocks, the water runs down on where the fire was, but the fire's been out for an hour. The rocks retain their heat. He said in some of these big stoves for up to 2 days, that you can continue to use it as a sauna. He's saying there's just so much abuse in these bath stoves or sauna stoves. Even the fire brick eventually just, crumbles, and just, his solution is a way to get, instead of 2 or 3 or 4 years out of a sauna stove, used regularly, like, with customers, like to get, 7 or 8 or 10 years out of a sauna stove. I hadn't heard too much, but they all talk like these things are not going to last very long. I think he even has some more pictures of, where's some pictures of the abuse these things take, where the stones are right, and they have to be broken apart, remade. But that's just kind of like, I'm looking for another picture, kind of like the price of doing business if you run a bathhouse in Russia, or I guess that other picture somewhere else. So let's go. He's loading the wood. Let me play this. Now, this must be, this side channel. And in his stove, it comes up the side, the flames lap over the top of the rocks, and then funnel down through the rocks. And I'm sure you'll see the crate, the rock pile on the far right might be very, very low. So the flames always have a way to get out if the soot starts to pile up. But the purists in Russia and Eastern Europe, etc., your flames, the only way to get a rock over 600 degrees Fahrenheit, and they want to push it over 1,000, is to have the flames, of course, touching the rock. And then, it's a balance between soot, build up, and super high temperatures, full air. You never want to choke anything like this down. And the rocks eventually, they use igneous rock. I'll try to give you some names of some of the rocks that I've come across, but not just soapstone's an igneous rock, granite is, but they use other names that I'm not familiar with. You can't use metamorphic rock, or what's the other? Sandstone is a sedimentary. You can't use those rocks. And you should only use certain rocks because other rocks will throw out all sorts of chemicals and gases. And igneous, the rocks that supposedly formed in the Earth's core and in volcanoes, and these are the ones that hold up to the 1,200 to 1,300 degrees. And he even shows you, I think here, he takes the temperature. They're all operating in Celsius, centigrade. So 720, that's like 1,200 and something Fahrenheit. And the rocks are just completely glowing red. And again, leave this guy alone. Don't tell him his T-shirt is nonsense. They don't know. We could have a Russian T-shirt. We wouldn't know. So I think his design is very good. Very good. Let me go back. Yeah, it is really, really better than just letting. If you are gonna just let the hot gases come straight up through the rocks, and again, the higher the firebox, the more space the flames are allowed to go straight up and lap up, the more smoke will be eaten up. I made a lot of my test stoves with a really high firebox before I wound some of the gases down or around or whatever, and it was almost always no smoke. If a long and thin firebox can go no smoke because the whole firebox acts like a rocket stove riser, but a really high, tall, and fat Russian stove or European masonry heater with a low firebox, where the flames kind of immediately come up 18 inches and hit a ceiling, and then they're asked to go this way and that way, that is a stove that almost always produces smoke. All right, let's spend 3 minutes or less looking at the design of a more traditional Russian bath or sauna stove, where the bricks are on top of the flame. The flame will go up and rise up through the bricks. I mean, again, this probably goes back hundreds of years. I mean, who knows how long. Again, I think that what that guy has designed, what I showed you earlier, is much better. So let me just not spend less than 2 minutes on this. The fire brick, of course, core. They're all grate stoves. The air comes in here. The clean out comes through the grate. Fire brick core. There'll be a descending channel and then a lifting channel. Most of them have that same feature. Building up the fire brick core, eventually there'll be some sort of a shelf to hold the rocks. There's your shelf to hold the rocks, which again, they're just using fire bricks. And they started to put these pieces of metal to reinforce the fire brick core, because the rocks do expand, even igneous rocks, and it'll smash out. The fire brick is it's not real tough. It's sand and silica. It'll crack it out. So everybody, whether they use a giant metal cage, they do reinforce the firebox in many different ways in these stoves. Sometimes they'll weld a frame around the outside, like angle irons, kind of on all the corners, to hold everything in place. It definitely needs to be reinforced if the stones are touching the fire brick. Which there's probably no way around it. I mean, you could try to create a cage to keep the stones a half inch away from the fire brick, like chicken wire or, I don't know, stainless steel hardware cloth, but it's going to burn through at 1,200 degrees. I don't know. Let me just continue to get through this. That is, let me pause. This is most of the old Russian stoves. In addition to the flames heating the stones, they also have a water tank somewhere. Sometimes the water tank is exposed to the flames, sometimes it's not. Because you don't want to pour ice cold water on the stones that you spent 3 hours, heating up to 1,200 degrees. You want your water to be at least 100 degrees Fahrenheit, if not 110 or 120. So I don't like what they're doing. You can't see it. There'd be a stainless steel water tank just next to the stove, with a pipe coming into the stones will be here, and then there'll be a descending channel for the smoke and gases, and then an ascending channel through to take the smoke and gases, hot gases into the chimney. They're putting a pipe into the descending channel, and I guess you would thermal siphon's not going to work. You would need, I guess, some sort of a pump. But I don't. This is terrible to me. You put cold water into the descending channel. It's like introducing air conditioning. You introduce air conditioning along the line, you're going to get smoke. There's no way around it. So this is, find another way, to heat. Don't do anything. If you can put your water tank right on the stove or the flames, like I'll show you, hopefully I can show you one other example, then do that, but heat your water some other way. This stinks. Okay. Maybe, again, these old designs in Russia, maybe there wasn't anybody around for a half mile. I don't care if it smoked like crazy. What I'm saying is sound. It really is. I'm not saying I know more than these old stove makers. Of course I don't. But they don't. Maybe the smoke poured out. They didn't care. That is an issue for us in the modern day. So it's always have to reinforce with they use metal plating. Have to reinforce the firebox, the fire brick that holds these stones. The stones will expand. Most people that I've seen build these stoves use really, really thick metal. It looks like a baby's crib, like a gigantic, thick cast iron crib, where around the fire brick. Okay, I know I'm up my 3 minutes. So this doesn't show the stones, but the stones would go up to about here. The gases then funnel through the stones. The stones would have to be extremely large. The one idea I had is to cut little 2-inch pieces of pipe. It couldn't be copper, it would melt. Something really hardcore, stainless steel pipe, and just lay the pipe amongst the stones, like create little passages using 2-inch pieces of pipe through the stones. Create a lot of different ways for the gases to come through the stones instead of the stones touching each other so it can clog with soot and ash. I don't know why they don't do that. Maybe the idea seemed like a good idea to me. Maybe these guys or you guys will think it's horse shit. But again, through the stones, here's the opening here. That brick's there just to be like a lintel, just to hold the roof. There's there's no reason for that other than to hold everything in place. Gases then pass into the descending channel, go to the back of the stove, up. The ascending channel is always smaller than the descending channel. So the speed will be more quickly moving. Things will move more quickly through the ascending channel than the chimney will be up here. All right, that's enough of that. It's way too long. Sorry to be so long-winded. Let me show you one other design that really makes a lot of sense for the amateur, or if you want to do something in the backyard. This is the best design coming up, unless you want to build an 8,000-pound Russian stove. Okay, Igor, as usual, has one of the best designs. I'll leave a link to this channel. This channel is just incredible to me. Some of the things he dives into. It's all in Russian, but you can follow it. That's the old design where the flames just come right up into the stones. And he's saying it won't last. He's saying, I've watched this video a few times. And there's your the ones we covered 2 months ago where you put your stones in here, but there's iron plate between the stones and the flame. And those stones are, you throw water in here, it'll be nice. It's a nice sauna experience. But again, this makes more sense for 99%. It's going to be hot. Steam's going to give off. But these purists, trust they're snobs. The snob factor is you have to have the flames through the stones. You got to get the flames glowing to over 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit. This will work just fine. But again, their stones are not touching the fire. So they're not at the most. I might have set up to 600. Probably most stones aren't going to go more than 300 or 400 degrees Fahrenheit. That's not that hot for these purists. So let me get through this, guys. So, okay, what's this one? Okay, the old designs where you just pile the stones from in these old designs, these rocks. I'm glad he has this graphic. This is interesting. These rocks have to be very, very big and round, or there's no way the gases are going to get through. And it seems like, well, Matt, that's a side channel. I don't think it is. This is brick. You really needs a half-inch side channel. I know you wouldn't have all the flame just finding the side channel, but how do you make the side channel? What do you do? I mean, I guess you could use 22 gauge sheet metal. You put a side channel in of 1 inch on each side. That way, it's a lot of the flame's still going to come up and wind through the bricks. He was saying this is just a mess. It's going to clog over time. But remember, my idea is to put you put 2 inch, maybe 2 inch wide by 2 inch long. You get 30 pieces of cut pipe and you just kind of lay it. So most stones aren't really touching each other. They're touching a 2 inch pipe, which is touching another stone. I don't know. I think that would let the gases get through better. Again, your stones aren't going to get to 1200 degrees, but they'll still get to 800 degrees. I mean, isn't that enough? They'll get to 900 degrees. So anyway, and then everybody says these don't last. You got to rip this thing apart in 3, 4, 5, 6 years or whatever. Pouring water all over it, and then the flame's out. The water just drips down everywhere. Anyway, okay, let me get through this. Show you his idea. All the way in the back, he's building it now. Very simple firebox. There's an ash cleanout door where the air can come in. 95% of Russian stoves are grate stoves where the air comes up. Wood is piled on here is the door. There's a grate. Air comes up through the wood. There's absolutely the sauna stove should be a grate stove, not a hearth stove. The air should come up through a grate from underneath for these stoves especially. So let me, there he added the door. Fire brick core. Outside is a regular brick. You have to have at least a few centimeters between the fire brick core and your red brick. They cannot be touching. You could shove cardboard in here. The cardboard eventually will go to ash, but it's a nice spacer. You could use ceramic wool. They cannot be touching. The fire brick core stands alone. This is a principle in all masonry heaters or Russian stoves. So let's see where this goes. Okay, at row 14 or so, you go up as high as you can if you want no smoke. Let the flames lap up as high as you can if you want no smoke. This is a 18 gauge metal steel iron plate. He's going to put the water tank on here. So a lot of the flames are lapping up right into this plate, which will warm the water tank. And the water will get to 100, 120 or more, which makes sense. You want to pour the warm water over the rocks. And then the back end is, he's using he's reversed it. So the back side is, there's your water tank. And the back side with a door is a constructed, sorry, I'll go back. Pause. It's some sort of steel welded. He basically said you have to get somebody to weld a big box of steel. But why couldn't you use a barrel? We'll talk about that a little bit later. You weld steel, and the reason you use steel and pile all the rocks up in the steel, here are the flames coming up through another grate, right up through the rocks. But the steel, he's saying, if it's steel and it's only 20 gauge, then it'll push out a little bit. It'll give. It's 20 gauge is a little flexible. I'm not sure what gauge, but even 18 gauge would be flexible. The rock could push out a bit, and the steel will hold together where the bricks will crack. And then there you open your door to pour in the water. The water, you don't start your sauna activity till the flame is completely out. You spend a few hours heating everything up. So it doesn't matter if the water drips down in the firebox, but your stove is already out at that point. And I like the door here too, in this box of metal, because you could get in here. You could open it up, and you could clean it out. Or if you couldn't get to all the stones, if you just had that imperial high heat mortar, imperial high heat cement. Around the edges, an inch along the edges, you could chisel it out every so many years and get in there and just clean all the rocks. So let me show you a better picture. Here you go. Yep, there you go. Let me go back though. I'll show you both. Pause. Okay, pretty simple. Just I'm not sure why he's putting fire brick just above the door here, but just a square, simple firebox at whatever row up. You count them. There's the water tank that sits on the metal plate. Flames will lap up into that plate and heat the water tank. And then, of course, there's another grate I'll try to show you a picture of that. And this whole thing would be filled with stones, and then just your chimney. Again, I like it because the metal will expand. Won't crack like brick or fire brick, and you could rip it off every so many years and clean your stones. A lot of the purists, the Europeans, I mean, it's a bunch of horseshit. They probably just want to sell more product. They'll say, well, you need to replace your stones every so often. And bull crap. The stone's been around for hundreds of millions of years or whatever. You just would have to clean the soot off them. You have to replace them. They just want to sell you more bullshit. All right, let me see what the grate looks like. Does he show you there? Yeah. Pretty heavy duty, of course, metal grate to hold the stones. And if this was, if you're doing this for a little backyard, little shed that you built for your own little sauna, you don't need to pile stones up 3 feet high. You just need 18 inches of stones. This whole thing's going to heat up, all the brick and all the fire brick. It's going to be a nice stove in and of itself. This big metal plate's going to get hot. You don't need to the gases, if you just 18 inches of stones or 24 inches of stones, it's not going to be clogged that easily. It's easy for the gases, and you could, again, put a little pipe or two, if you had to, in the stones, so the gases will, for safety, will always, even if it gets clogged with soot, the gases will always be able to find a way out and won't carbon monoxide out in your little sauna. Not a good sauna event when you get carbon monoxide out in your own little hut with your first date with your girlfriend. I'd have a way for the gases to escape around the side. I would, one idea I had was just I'd roll. You can get that hardware cloth at a 1/2-inch square. It's just like a sifter grid. Any Home Depot or Lowe's has hardware cloth. You just roll it up into you roll it up like a newspaper, like a dog bone hardware, and you just kind of shove it along the sides between the metal and the stones. And that's actually, I've even done coal tests with hardware cloth as the grate with the coal bed, and after 2 or 3 coal tests, it's still fine. Now, it's not going to last more than a few years, but it's going to be fine. I'd put that around the edges, just hardware cloth, little rolls of hardware cloth, or make your pipe through the middle of the stones at 1 inch with the hardware cloth. If you don't have a pipe, always have a way for the gases to get around the stones. If you're soot, again, you're going to lose 150 degrees on your stones. So what? It's better than going kaput. You know what I mean? It's not worth it. So your stones, again, are, you can get them. You'll be able to get them to 800, 600, 700, 800 degrees with that sort of backup, where you're not going to glow, bright red like what I showed you earlier. All right, let me see if there's anything else. Yeah, one more discussion, because I cater to the novice and the person without a lot of money. Why not just use a barrel instead of the, what he had made with steel? And if you were doing this again on the cheap, and you could make yourself a little wood hut for the sauna in your backyard or whatever, you don't, if you have, you don't need the fire brick core. I mean, it's not you're gonna have to remake it every 4 or 5 years. Anyway, so just create a brick box. If you find bricks that have a high percentage of clay, the older bricks are better. Or get a brick or a paver from a brickyard, test it, throw it in a fire pit, see if bricks will hold up to the heat. They don't like quick changes in heat. They're fired to 1800 to 2000 degrees Fahrenheit. Heat's no problem. It's taking it from, if it's ice cold out, taking the brick from 30 degrees in just a few minutes to 250 or 400, it'll crack. It doesn't like the quick up and down. So just create a brick box, get a piece of metal, or scrap yard, whatever, a piece of cake, just like he put the water, and put the barrel over the back. But here's something I would do a little bit different. You could incorporate the design of the best Russian bathhouse sauna stove we looked at coming in. You could simply run a pipe. You'd fill your barrel with rocks, but you'd run a pipe up like a rocket stove. Run a riser or a 4-inch or a 6-inch pipe to the top of the barrel with a 4-inch gap between the pipe and the barrel. And then have the gases, just like the guy proposed in the first example, have the gases feed down along the pipe like a rocket stove design, through the rocks, and then out a hole cut at the bottom of the barrel that then would act as your chimney. So just make a rocket stove to a degree, or a rocket stove riser where that grate is. You would still need, you need a grate, of course. The rocks go in there, and then what would you? Well, if it's a small enough box, I mean, I think you could get away with a 4-inch pipe, because you're going to have so much. It's going to it's going to hit a traffic jam anyway, getting through all the stones. The 4-inch is going to move a lot faster than it funneling through the stones. And the biggest problem is, how do you, if the barrel has, it's the rocket stove barrel, you flip it upside down, which means the bottom is open. How do you pile up rocks in there? If you pile up rocks, how do they hold their shape? You almost have to put a little bit of mortar on the rocks, a little bit of cement to have them hold their shape, and then you'd have to turn the barrel over, flip it upside down, turn it over with a little bit of mortar to hold the rocks, and then the mortar eventually, after a few firings, would give way, and the rocks would kind of fall against the sides of the barrel. But I don't know. You could also, as a safety mechanism, I would also run, I'd run a real, a real thin 1-inch pipe through the rocks, so the gases can get down and out, in case your rocks build up with soot, or find a way with that hardware cloth to create a space between the side of the barrel and the rocks by rolling the hardware cloth up into little things in newspaper and smashing it out or flattening it out. And then, your rocks are, your heat's going to go up that riser and hit the top of the barrel. It's going to throw out a ton of heat like a rocket stove. It's going to be pretty low smoke. Once you do not expect it'll smoke like crazy as long as those rocks are cold. When the rocks heat up, the smoke will go away. It'll take a long time. I take that back. But those rocks will probably get to 500 or 600 degrees eventually, and you have a little door. Of course, you need a door. You just cut a door with an angle grinder into your top of your barrel, so you could put your ladle in there and throw your water. So basically, what he did here, but with a barrel, not a pretty cheap way of creating your own little sauna. And again, it's you shouldn't be in there when it's burning anyway. You burn it, you heat everything up for 2 hours, and then you get in. You shouldn't be in there really when it's burning, unless it's 100% safe. This kind of stove, you got to be careful. Thanks, guys.